As mentioned, my name is Francesca Cenni, and I work in the Technical Assistance Branch of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions Secretariat. It is a pleasure today to speak about this very important subject, bridging information under the Rotterdam Convention. I would like to give you a little background and some references for this area of work. The references, as you see in the presentation, are the Chemical Review Committee document CRC 4/INF3, but also the UNEP FAO RC CRC 3/4, this document. The CRC 3/4 and CRC 4/INF3. You will find deep information on these documents about bridging information under the Rotterdam Convention. In addition, the CRC developed guidance on bridging information, and this is published in the website of the Rotterdam Convention under Chemical Review Committee and Guidance. Later on, I will show you how to find the information. So, at the beginning of its work, the Chemical Review Committee had to judge the acceptability of a notification of final regulatory action. And when it came to criterion B3E of Annex 3, where the notifying party has, the CRC has to assess if the notifying party has used a risk evaluation from another country or international body as the basis for its national decision, the CRC encountered a lot of problems. So at its first meeting, CRC was mandated to develop policy guidance on how to assess this criterion. And so this work started at the very beginning of the history of the CRC, and already at its third meeting, the Conference of the Parties agreed that in order to satisfy criterion B3E of Annex 3 to the Rotterdam Convention, bridging information providing evidence of prevailing conditions in the notifying country would have to be submitted. It was then agreed that the working paper on bridging information will need to be developed further to accommodate the considerations of a global risk evaluation or a risk evaluation conducted in another country. So, as mentioned, this work was accomplished at CRC 4, and there are two elements of this guidance. So, as you know, the risk evaluation under the Rotterdam Convention is the hazard or the toxicity of the chemical combined with the exposure. And a country has to show that has conducted the risk evaluation, so has considered the hazard and the exposure in at the country level in order to take the final regulatory action to ban or restrict a chemical. And when this is notified to the Secretariat, the country needs to provide background information on how this decision was taken. And when I say there are two elements to this, now the country can take a risk evaluation of another country or a risk evaluation conducted at the global level, like for example by the Montreal Protocol or by the Stockholm Convention, and then bridge this information to show that the same prevailing conditions are existing at the national level, and therefore this was the basis for taking the decision of banning or severely restricting the chemical. Now, I introduce what bridging is. So, bridging under the Rotterdam Convention is when a notifying party has used the risk evaluation from another country or international body. The main idea is the party may use whatever information they choose in taking a national decision to ban or severely restrict the chemical. As I mentioned, for example, a risk evaluation, an exposure assessment from another country or international organization. But they have to show the criterion B3 of Annex 2 is fulfilled, and this requires to show that the risk under prevailing conditions in the country that submit the notification of the final regulatory action is present. So the policy guidance developed by the CRC on this aspect points on important considerations. So the country has to demonstrate how the prevailing conditions in a notifying country relate to those in the country which completed the original risk evaluation. And there are three very important points for the CRC to validate this information that is sent by the DNA. Exposure or potential exposure is a key element, and the information must be science-based or based on best available knowledge. And so to demonstrate exposure, it is important to provide, for example, examples of how the chemical is used in the country, or data or surveys to demonstrate the effect of the exposure and the impact of the exposure at the national level. This will allow for the data to be sufficiently detailed to enable the CRC to make an assessment. And so these are the important points that the CRC will consider while assessing information which is breached and included in the final regulatory action, in the notification of final regulatory action. Then the policy guidance continues to show how it is possible to breach information for pesticides and how it is possible to breach information for industrial chemicals. So when we speak about pesticides, since the hazard is linked to the concentration, to the type of contaminants included in a formulation, for example, the information that is breached should describe all these elements. In particular, if the pesticide is in granular form, in liquid form, it should report the concentration and the formulation in which it is, other contaminants or the type of formulation that it is done at the country level. And then when it comes to bridging information on exposure, it is very important to describe use patterns, type of application, the rate, the frequency, the period of application, and the type of equipment used, because that shows how the population is exposed. And then and this is for human exposure. For environmental exposure, it's very important to describe climatic or geographic conditions. And then it's important to describe the requirements for the protection of human health, for protective clothing, special application equipment, and to compare this with the conditions of use at the national level. For environmental exposure, it is important to describe buffer zones, effect on non-target organisms, and to compare the soil, the ecology, and the ecosystem of the country submitting the notification with the condition in the country that originally conducted the risk evaluation to ban or severely restrict the chemical, the pesticide. Now we consider how to bridge information for industrial chemicals. So again, it's important to demonstrate the human exposure, the worker exposure, the general population, the end users of the industrial chemicals, and possibly to provide data on this, to describe it, but also provide science-based information. For environmental exposure, it's very important to know the soil composition, how the underground or the surface water systems are affected by the industrial chemicals, if there is emission into air, wildlife, and the habitat. And it's, in this case, for example, it's very important to cite monitoring data or to compare monitoring data of similar industrial chemicals if these are available. And then it's important to describe the events leading to exposure for industrial chemicals. And a key factor is to then underline critical events that happen, or it is demonstrated they happened in the country in the chain of events leading to exposure. And these are notably the production, the storage, the distribution, the use, and the final disposal of the industrial chemical at the national level. Any other data demonstrating similarity in conditions in the notifying country are important. If, for example, another chemical which has a similar behavior and effect has been monitored, and the chain of events can be that lead to exposure can be compared with that, this information can be included. Now we come to the only example in the history until now of the CRC where the CRC accepted breached information, and then the chemical was listed in Annex 3 of the Rotterdam Convention by the COP based on valid breached information. This is the example of Jamaica, that submitted a notification of final regulatory action on aldicarb. And Jamaica provided an extrapolation of the same prevailing condition of use as in the USA, and the USA had severely restricted aldicarb. So aldicarb was banned for the majority of the uses in the USA. You can find information on the DGD developed by the CRC on aldicarb in English, and you find a reference in this slide. But we'll go through the case study and see how Jamaica breached information for aldicarb. So, for environmental risk, Jamaica said the US banned aldicarb due to water contamination in limestone areas. Underground rivers in limestone areas across Jamaica were there where farming was done. So the island ecology, an island like Jamaica, is more susceptible to pollution. because there are no buffer zones. There are no areas in which the pesticide can degrade. So it will arrive immediately from the fields to the underground waters in Jamaica. So the environmental risk was considered unacceptable because the prevailing conditions at the national level in Jamaica were even more, the environmental exposure in Jamaica was more probable than in the US. So the CRC concluded that the Jamaica notification on aldicarb met the criterion B3 of Annex 2 and COP4 listed as aldicarb in Annex 3 of the Rotterdam Convention. But we continue to analyze the information that was breached by Jamaica. So when it comes to the uses in the regulated category, Jamaica used the notification of final regulatory action of the EU. All intended uses were related to the soil application of granular formulation. Harmful organisms to be controlled covered a large range of insects, nematodes, and aphids, and over a wide range of crops, including fruits. And Jamaica said TMIC 10 and 15 granular formulations of aldicarb were known to be used as insecticides to control sucking aphids, mites, leaf miners, and nematodes, particularly in citrus fruit and ornamentals. They were available to all farmers and could be applied to vegetables. They were applied to soil by hand. So they showed there was direct exposure in the conditions of use in Jamaica. So aldicarb is the most acutely toxic agricultural chemical currently being used in both Jamaica and the USA. It is twice as acutely toxic as parathion, which is banned in Jamaica. This is another consideration, a comparison of the hazard with another chemical which is banned. So this was used for the human health risk evaluation. I want to go back to the previous slide to come back to the concept of risk evaluation under the Rotterdam Convention. This includes considerations of the hazard. So as you see, the hazard was compared by Jamaica with the EU final regulatory action, and the also the toxicity of another chemical which was banned in Jamaica. And we have already talked about the human exposure, the conditions of use. So Jamaica covered the two very key elements of a risk evaluation under the Rotterdam Convention, compared the hazard and compared the exposure. Let's see the risk evaluation for the environmental risk evaluation. In the USA, aldicarb is registered for use under very restricted conditions. This entails strong enforcement measures under environmental conditions that are less susceptible to contamination than those found in an island ecology such as Jamaica. Due to the small size of an island, overall water resources are more limited than in larger continental countries. It is impractical to apply large buffer zones to protect water from pesticide contamination. As evidenced by incidents of pollution in the US, there is a risk of contamination of groundwater and surface water. The risk evaluation took into consideration the island's ecology and compared it to the conditions in the US, where the contamination occurred, and also the measures that the US had put in place to prevent the contamination. So the decision of banning Arctic by Jamaica was taken on the basis that the pesticide presented an unacceptable risk of contamination of ground and surface water in the island. Thank you for your attention, and I invite you to see with me where this information can be found on the website of the Rotterdam Convention. So I now share my desktop. So this is the page where you will find more information on bridging information. So it's the Rotterdam Convention, the convention, and then the Chemical Review Committee, and then guidance. So you can find it here. And in the guidance, you have to consult the handbook of working procedures and policy guidance of the Chemical Review Committee, and then open this document and go to page 47, where you can find information on bridging, on how to bridge information under the Rotterdam Convention. Here. And then you will find the references, the guidance on pesticide, on industrial chemicals, and further on. And then also the references provided here are provided here and in the presentation. Is UNEP FAO RCCRC 128 Annex 3 is the first document. No, sorry, this is not the right. I'm not in the right page. It's in fact CRC 3/4, the reference. There we go. This is the reference document for the policy guidance, but also this document at page 47. So I go back to my presentation. I thank you very much for your attention,